Imagine condensing a 4-year, ultra-prestigious college degree into just 2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and now imagine the catalyst for that monumental shortcut was just a single 3-hour lesson with a total stranger wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
I mean, that sounds completely made up.
Right. But it's totally real. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a short, but honestly pretty profound essay by Derek Sivers. It's titled, "There's No Speed Limit."
Mm.
And we're using this story to really examine a concept that, well, most of us just accept entirely without question,
Yeah.
the timeline of success.
Yeah, we usually imagine achieving any major milestone as this highly predictable staircase. You take step one, you wait for the semester to end, or you wait for your annual performance review, then you take step two, and you just wait for the next prerequisite.
Exactly.
We basically live our lives with this invisible metronome ticking in the background, dictating exactly how fast we are allowed to climb. 4 years for high school, 4 years for college, a standardized number of years to climb a corporate ladder. Society treats that timeline as if it's like a structural law of the universe.
But then you look at the raw potential of human drive, and that invisible metronome just stops. You realize the staircase we all accept is honestly just a suggestion.
Yeah, just a suggestion.
So the objective for our deep dive today is to explore this radical idea for you, the listener. What if the timeline society so readily accepts for learning and mastery are entirely artificial? We are diving into the story of a 17-year-old kid who managed to compress literally years of complex music theory into just a few hours.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. He completely hacked the traditional education system, and it all starts with what seems like the most mundane phone call imaginable.
Well, the mundane is often the camouflage for, life-changing inflection points. So we're looking at 17-year-old Derek Sivers, who is just about to start his first year at the Berklee College of Music. And he calls a local recording studio with this completely random, casual question about music typesetting.
Right, and the studio owner who picks up the phone happens to be a man named Kimo Williams. And Kimo is a Berklee graduate himself and a former teacher at the college.
Yeah.
So when he hears that this kid is heading to Berklee in the fall, he doesn't just answer the typesetting question. He makes this wild, completely unsolicited offer. He says, and I'm pulling from the text here, "I'll bet I can teach you 2 years of theory and arranging in only a few lessons."
Wow.
Yeah, he says, "I suspect you can graduate in 2 years if you understand there's no speed limit." And he offers to do it for free.
See, notice the philosophical boundary Kimo sets there before logistics are even discussed. If you understand there's no speed limit, he's basically testing the kid's mental framework right out of the gate.
Yeah, and the logistical test follows immediately after that.
Yeah.
Kimo tells him, "Come by my studio at 9:00 tomorrow for your first lesson, if you're interested." That is the entire prerequisite. Just show up at 9:00 a.m.
Which is a brilliant psychological filter, by the way.
Oh, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Kimo later talked about this from his own perspective as a mentor. He uses this specific offer as a highly deliberate weed-out tactic. He meets kids all the time who say they desperately want to be great musicians.
Right.
They have the vocabulary, they buy the expensive gear, they talk endlessly about their dreams. He tells them, "I can help you. Show up at my studio at 9:00 if you're serious." And his stark observation over the years is that nobody ever shows up.
Okay, I have to challenge this premise, though. I mean, 9:00 a.m. doesn't sound like much of a test. If a mentor wants to test my dedication, I would expect them to say, meet me at the studio at 4:30 in the morning. 9:00 a.m. is sleeping in for a lot of people. How does a time that comfortable act as a filter?
Well, because it's not a test of physical endurance, right? It's a test of basic proactive intentionality. When a test is extremely difficult, people have a built-in excuse for failing.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. But when the barrier to entry is incredibly low, like showing up at a perfectly reasonable hour failing to do it, exposes a complete lack of genuine drive. People are often in love with the idea of being a musician, but they completely recoil at the actual work. So by making the test mundane, Kimo filters out the passive dreamers who only want the aesthetic of success.
Okay, yeah, it functions like a real-life CAPI TCA for human drive.
A CAP TCHA.
Yeah, you know those little tests on websites that ask you to select all the squares with traffic lights to prove you aren't a robot?
Oh, right, yeah.
The task itself is incredibly easy. The point isn't to test your intelligence. The point is simply to verify that a real active human being is on the other side of the screen. So Kimo's 9:00 a.m. invitation is basically a behavioral CAPI TCH designed to verify that a genuinely serious student is on the other end of the phone.
That's a perfect analogy. He is selecting strictly for the doers.
And Derek proves he is a doer. He shows up at the studio at 8:40 the next morning, but he knows the parameters of the assignment, so he doesn't knock early.
Right, he waits.
He waits outside on the street for 20 minutes and rings the bell at exactly 8:59 a.m.
He signals respect for the boundary that was set, which is huge.
Definitely. So the door opens, and the text paints this vivid picture of Kimo. He's a tall man in a Hawaiian shirt wearing a big hat with a square scar on his nose. He has a laid-back demeanor and a huge smile. He's sizing the kid up, just nodding. And Kimo actually admitted later that when his doorbell rang at 8:59, he'd completely forgotten about the offer.
Because no one ever actually takes him up on it.
Exactly.
So Derek passes the behavioral CAPI-TCHA. He proves his initial drive. But, drive alone does not explain how a human brain physically absorbs months of a dense college curriculum in a single morning. What actually happens when they step inside the studio?
Well, the traditional classroom ceremony is completely eliminated. There's no syllabus review. There is no icebreaker. After exactly a 1-minute welcome, they sit down at the piano and immediately begin analyzing the sheet music for a jazz standard.
They dive straight into the deep end of the cognitive pool.
Seriously.
Yeah.
The text outlines the specific musical mechanics Kimo throws at him, and it is intense. Kimo starts rapidly explaining chords based on the diatonic scale. He breaks down the dissonance of the tritone found in the 5 chord with the flat 7 and explains how that specific dissonance is what forces the music to want to resolve back to the 1 chord.
Okay, let's unpack that musical terminology a bit because it is pretty dense. In music theory, dissonance is essentially, musical tension.
Right. Think of dissonance like a thick rubber band being stretched to its absolute physical limit.
Yes.
When you stretch a rubber band, the tension creates an uncomfortable, highly unstable energy. It desperately wants to snap back into a relaxed state. In music, a tritone is an incredibly dissonant, unstable combination of notes.
Right. It's very jarring.
Exactly. When you play it, the human ear feels that tension. The ear practically begs the musician to play the next chord, the 1 chord, which releases the tension, like letting go of the rubber band.
And that tension and release is basically the mathematical foundation of jazz harmony. Kimo isn't just showing Derek notes. He is explaining the underlying physics of why certain chords compel the listener's emotions in a specific direction.
And Kimo doesn't just deliver a passive lecture on this concept either.
Right.
Within 1 minute of explaining the rubber band tension of that flat 7 chord, he instantly quizzes Derek.
Putting him on the spot.
Yeah. He asks, if the 5 chord with the flat 7 has that tritone, then so does another flat 7 chord. Which one? And Derek hesitates, thinks about the math, and guesses the flat 2 chord.
And he gets it.
He does. Kimo confirms it, calling it a substitute chord. Then, Kimo issues a 1-word command. He tells Derek to reharmonize all the chords in the entire chart using that new rule and says, go.
Go. I love that. It is an immediate demand to apply theoretical knowledge to a practical problem.
See, this is where I really struggle with the physical reality of this story. Absorbing a college semester of complex music theory. Understanding diatonic scales, calculating tritones, applying flat 2 substitutions in a 3-hour window. It just sounds like a recipe for a psychological meltdown.
It does sound like a lot.
We are always taught that the human brain requires downtime to process and file complex information. Doing this for 3 hours straight should have completely burned out a 17-year-old kid. How is rapid-fire learning like this mechanically possible?
Well, you avoid burnout through the mechanics of a flow state. When we look at how traditional education operates, we see a system that is just bloated with administrative overhead. Think about a standard 4-month college semester. A massive percentage of that time is spent on classroom management, reviewing old material, and basically waiting for the slowest student in the room to catch up to the baseline.
Right. Kimo basically stripped away 100% of that filler.
Exactly. He removed the dead air. Furthermore, Kimo treated the facts not as passive information to be memorized for a midterm exam, but as immediate, interactive challenges.
Yeah, applying it instantly.
Right. By forcing Derek to instantly reharmonize the chart using the flat 2 substitution, the abstract theory became a functional tool within 60 seconds. When a challenge perfectly matches your highest level of capability and you receive instant feedback, you don't burn out, you lock in.
And Derek explicitly validates that feeling. He says the pace was intense, and he absolutely loved it. He felt like he was being kept constantly in over his head. He compares the sensation of learning that fast to the adrenaline rush you experience while playing a fast-paced video game.
And that video game analogy perfectly captures the psychology of accelerated learning. When you play a complex video game, you don't sit down and read a 400-page manual for 3 weeks before you are allowed to touch the controller.
No, you just jump in.
You push a button, you fail, the screen tells you immediately why you failed, you adjust your strategy, and you level up. The cognitive load is manageable because the feedback loop is instantaneous. Kimo was throwing complex musical problems at Derek and making him prove in real time that he could solve them.
It's amazing. And the outcome of this video game-style adrenaline sprint is staggering. In that single 3-hour lesson on the first morning, Kimo taught Derek an entire semester of Berklee's harmony courses.
In one morning.
One morning. And in their next 4 lessons together, he taught him the next 4 semesters of harmony and arranging classes. 5 casual lessons basically equated to 5 full college semesters.
Okay, so Derek has now absorbed a massive amount of highly technical knowledge. He holds the asset. But holding the knowledge in a private recording studio is vastly different from getting a massive bureaucratic institution to acknowledge it.
Right, because universities, especially prestigious ones, they operate on credit hours, strict prerequisites, and mandatory seat time. How does a student force a rigid bureaucracy to recognize rogue, accelerated learning?
So what does he do?
Derek executes a complete, audacious institutional bypass. First, he arrives at the college and takes the standard placement exams. And because of the sheer volume of knowledge Kimo forced into his brain, Derek effortlessly tests out of the first 6 semesters of foundational requirements.
Wow. He leverages the institution's own assessment tools to shatter their timeline.
Exactly. But the truly fascinating part is how he handles the rest of the degree. Based on Kimo's advice, Derek refuses to settle into the normal pace for his remaining classes. He goes to the campus bookstore, buys the course materials and syllabi for his other required subjects, and simply teaches himself the material in his dorm room.
Which really highlights the psychological shift that occurred in Kimo's studio. The speed limit was permanently lifted in his mind. But self-directed learning requires maintaining that intense flow state without the mentor present to enforce it.
True. And he maintained it by doing the homework on his own time, entirely outside the classroom structure. Once he mastered the material, he would march directly to the department head's office and ask to take the final exam immediately.
Approaching a department head to bypass a class requires an incredible amount of audacity. I mean, the system is designed to say no to that exact request. Bureaucracies protect their processes. Why did the gatekeepers yield?
Because bureaucracies are generally designed to protect the institution from incompetence, not to block undeniable competence.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, when a student walks in and says, "I already possess the exact knowledge you are planning to sell me over the next 16 weeks, just let me prove it," it puts the institution in a difficult position. The gatekeepers yield when confronted with undeniable, tangible proof. Derek took the final exams early, and he passed them.
So he proved that the core commodity of the university is the knowledge itself, not the time spent sitting in a chair acquiring it.
Precisely. And by combining this self-taught sprint with the regular course load, Derek Sivers graduated from college in 2.5 years. He walked out of Berklee with his bachelor's degree at the age of 20. The central thesis of this entire deep dive is the foundational lesson Kimo imparted. The standard pace is for chumps.
The standard pace is for chumps. The phrasing is deliberately provocative. Educational systems, corporate training programs, career ladders, they are systematically designed so that the average participant can keep up.
Right.
The speed limit on the highway is dictated by the stopping distance of the heaviest, slowest vehicle. The system must accommodate the median. But Kimo's underlying philosophy is that if your internal drive exceeds the median, you are under no obligation to accept the default speed setting.
It's so true. I like to think of the traditional system as basically a moving walkway at an airport.
Okay, I like that.
You step onto the belt, you put your hand on the rail, and you just stand there. It's comfortable. The system guarantees that you, along with everyone else standing on that belt, will eventually reach the end of the terminal at a safe, uniform speed.
Right. The outcome is guaranteed, provided you do not step off the path. But the timeline is entirely out of your control.
Exactly. Yet, if you look closely at that moving walkway, there is absolutely no physical barrier preventing you from running. Sure, there are people standing in your way, there's luggage you have to dodge, but the system itself doesn't stop your legs from moving.
You can just walk right past them.
You can sprint down that belt. The system continues to operate underneath you, but your personal velocity allows you to reach the destination in a fraction of the time it takes the people who are passively standing still. You apply your own momentum on top of the baseline.
And the social norm is to stand still. The bureaucracy expects you to stand still. Derek realized the walkway was just a platform, and he decided to sprint.
And bypassing the traditional timeline saved Derek years of his life and likely a fortune in tuition fees. But an experience that intense, it inevitably alters the trajectory of your entire life.
Oh, absolutely. Once you see behind the curtain and realize the rules governing pace are entirely flexible, it creates a permanent psychological shift. You cannot unsee the matrix.
The text actually details the stark contrast in his mindset. Before that 9:00 a.m. test, Derek describes himself as just a kid who casually wanted to be a musician. He was standing on the walkway.
Yeah.
After those 5 lessons, he adopted a permanent no speed limit mentality, applying it to his businesses, his writing, and his entire life. He states unequivocally that he owes every great thing that has happened to him to Kimo's raised expectations.
It's amazing. The entire inflection point of a life rested on a willingness to show up at 8:59 a.m. and the audacity of a stranger to demand more from him.
The story concludes with this really profound full-circle moment. 20 years after Derek dismantled their timeline, the Berklee College of Music invited him back to campus. They asked him to deliver the opening keynote speech to their incoming first-year students.
See, an institution asking the ultimate rule breaker to address their newest students is the ultimate validation of his method.
It really is. And to this day, the text notes, Derek and Kimo remain friends.
So what does this actually mean for you listening to this right now? Where in your own life, your career trajectory, the business you are building, the language you are trying to learn, where are you defaulting to the standard pace simply because it is the speed everyone else has mutually agreed upon?
Yeah, where are you standing passively on the walkway when you have the capacity and the energy to sprint?
Are you waiting for a promotion timeline dictated by a human resources manual? Are you taking a year to write a project that you could finish in a month if you stripped away the filler and treated it like a high-stakes video game? Systems are built to accommodate the average, but your internal drive allows you to rewrite the timeline of your own potential. You do not need the institution's permission to accelerate.
The speed limit is an illusion. It really is. But I want to leave you with a final, slightly different perspective to chew on. We have spent this entire deep dive focusing on how you can break the speed limit, how you can locate a mentor, how you can hack the bureaucracy, how you can become the sprinter on the walkway. But what if the ultimate takeaway from this essay isn't just about accelerating your own personal journey?
Shifting the focus outward completely changes the entire dynamic of the story.
It does. What if the most powerful thing you can do with this realization is to become the Kimo for someone else?
I love that.
Right. The greatest speed multiplier in the world might not be your own sprinting. It might be your willingness to spot someone who's just casually standing on the walkway, entirely unaware of their own potential. Imagine the impact of pulling them aside, handing them the impossible challenge, and simply saying, go. The standard pace is only the rule until someone dares to demand more. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.